Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. My guest today is Phazha Bothongo, a 23-year-old South African born in Botswana and currently living in the United Kingdom. She completed a master's in neuroscience and translational medicine at Queen Mary University of London and went on to do her PhD at the Preventive Neurology Unit, Wolfson Institute. In this episode, we learned that one of the particular life events that led to Phazha getting into this field of science, rather the roots of her science, was when her grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She discovered that there was no cure for it and went on to pursue a degree in neuroscience. Phazha chose this field so that her research can impact and contribute to the knowledge of neuroscience. Her PhD research is focused on the effects of socio-economic deprivation and ethnicity on the risk of dementia in Black minority ethnic groups in comparison to the white counterparts. This is crucial as this particular group, specifically Black, African and Caribbean, are at risk and more likely to develop dementia at a younger age and get diagnosed early, before the age of 65, rather than the white counterparts. This research is so important as there's very little research on the Black demographic. Interesting, right? Well, you better tune in and learn more as Phazha breaks this research down for us, including so much more. Also, remember, if you want to get into the podcasting scene, I highly recommend using Buzzsprout as your podcasting host. Now, let's get into this podcast. Hi, Phazha. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So great having you here. I'm really excited to hear about yourself and everything that you do.
Yes, I'm excited as well.
Fantastic. So let's just get into it. Tell everybody a bit about yourself, your age, where you're from, and where you're currently based right now.
Sure. Well, my name is Phazha. I am 23. I'm an Aquarius. And where I'm from is a bit of confusing. I was born in Botswana, raised in South Africa till I was 9, and then I moved to the UK and have been living there since. And right now I'm currently pursuing a PhD. I'm in my first year, and it's in neuroscience. So brain stuff, a lot of brain stuff.
Oh, exciting. So before we get into the brain stuff and the neuroscience, your science can be all consuming, but where's that one place where when everything just gets a bit too much, you can go to and you just find yourself and you are in Zen? Where is your happy place?
Do you know what? There's a museum in London called Tate Modern. And it is honestly my favorite place to go. It's like, okay, most times I go there like if I have like a heartbreak or just like a bad day. But it is, you know what? The art is amazing. I love the people there, the architecture. And it just has this like, it has a top floor. Like you take this elevator up, I think it's beyond like the 13th floor, and you can just have the whole view of London. And it's the most beautiful thing ever. And again, like it just gives you perspective. So that's my place. If I see anyone there copying me, I'm not gonna be happy. I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's so
my place.
So you currently living in London, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. So, you did say that you've moved around a bit. So then just take us through, as you're moving through these different continents, not continents, countries and one continent. Give us a brief overview of your education. So what did you study? Where did you study? And what are some of those influences that actually got you into the science, like the root of your science? What made you be like, this is what I want to do?
which is so important. Yeah, well, I left South Africa when I was 9. So I only really started thinking of what I wanted to be when I was in the UK. I went to boarding school, and I was generally always good with the sciences, drawn to it. I always wanted to be a scientist just because my older sister said she was going to be one. So I was like, I'm going to copy you. And then I think I must have been around 12, 13 years old when my my paternal grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And I remember the moment quite vividly. I came to the library at home, and we had a couple of medical books. So I was just like, okay, like, this is super easy. I'm just going to find, like, the treatment and diagnosis. Like, why is everybody so frenzied? Like, what's going on? And I learned that there was no cure. And that was my first time ever realizing that there are some medical conditions in which there are no cures. And it shook me. I was very confused, because then I just thought, then why are they taking him to the doctors if there's no cure? Like, what are they going to do? And I think around 15, I decided to then be an astronaut as well. But then I just kept thinking again, like, there's still no cure for my grandfather. And that's why I decided, no, then I want to go into neuroscience 1. There are a lot of psychiatric and neurological conditions which don't have cures, or there's very little understanding. And I felt like, you know what? I want to go and study something where I can have an impact. I don't want to just reiterate what everyone has already learned. I want to be able to make a contribution. So then that led me, when I was 18, I went to Sussex University in Brighton in the UK, and I did my BSc honors in medical neuroscience. And actually, the first day I started university, my grandfather passed away. So it was very, very sentimental. Yeah, to complications related to Alzheimer's disease. So it was like the day I finally started, that happened. But it took me a bit back, but it just made me realize that much more. So I finished my bachelor's degree, and then I moved to London, where I did my master's at Queen Mary University of London in Neuroscience and Translational Medicine, which I finished last year, 2019. I think it was like September, August, I finished. Yeah, and then October, I started my PhD at the same university. So there wasn't much of a break I took, but I wanted to get straight into the answers.
Wow, what a story. And, when I always ask those people the root of their science, I think this is something that's very sentimental. That's very deep. And thank you so much for being open about that. But I'm glad that, that could be the one motivating factor. And I think it's something that you always go back to. And that's probably, maybe I'm being presumptuous, probably the why and why you're continuing.
100%. Like, there were so many opportunities where I was like, why am I doing this if I can just model or live my life or, No, honestly, I heavily considered being an Instagram model. No shade to anyone. I think it's a skill. But then again, you remember that how many people are going through what my family did. And it was like, I have to keep at it. Like, there's a need for this. It's not just a want to have a degree and be praised. I really don't care about that. It's just the fact that, no, there seriously is a need for this right now. And to this date, there's still no cure. For Alzheimer's disease, the most prevalent form of dementia, and all dementias, there's absolutely zero cure. Nobody knows what's going on. Like in that sense, we've had breakthroughs, but yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that then brings me to my next question.
Sure.
So now, like you said, that you started in October, you started your PhD. So the focus is on the effects of socio-economic deprivation and ethnicity,
Yes.
and the risk of dementia in Black minority groups,
Yes.
in comparison to the white population.
Yes.
So before you even tell me about your research, which we're going to get into, I want you to explain what dementia is, because I think we always hear the word, well, personally as well, but I don't think there's a clear understanding on what it is. So could you please explain for us?
Sure. Well, according to like the Alzheimer's Association, they say that dementia is an overall term for diseases and conditions characterized by a decline in memory, language, problem solving, and other thinking skills that affect a person's ability to perform everyday activities. One of them, of examples, obviously, is memory loss. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of it, but there are many different types of dementias. There's vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, Parkinson's disorder, dementia, or Lewy body dementia. And each of them have quite distinct characteristics about them, but generally sometimes they tend to overlap. But one of the first misconceptions I guess people have is memory loss. People think dementia is just forgetting. So typically when our elders get older and their cognitive function slows down, or they tend to forget more, people get panicked, like, is this dementia? But it's more than that. There's, 90% of people with dementia experience neuropsychiatric symptoms. So that's depression, anxiety, apathy, which is more like no real need to live life. They just sort of, sometimes they don't eat, sometimes they overeat, but there's a whole bunch of psychiatric symptoms that also come into place. And, personalities change. And just so that there's a whole bunch of things, which is, it's bigger than memory loss. And the important thing to note down in that is that it is accelerated memory loss. Gradual memory loss is a normal, gradual cognitive decline is a normal part of aging. We're just not as fast or quick, or, learning new skills may take a bit more time, but with dementia, it is accelerated. And that's an important thing for people to know. It's just so that they're not terrified if they start noticing that, their parents or their elders are forgetting things there, and, but it's bigger than memory loss, much bigger. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's a very good explanation. Like you said, I think most people just assume that memory loss equals dementia, and I personally didn't even know that there's a whole umbrella. It actually falls under umbrella, and I also had that misconception that when you think Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, I thought those were their own different conditions, but it actually is an umbrella term for all of those conditions, which is so interesting. So thank you for teaching me that.
No problem. If you want to think about it, we have the physical aspect whereby it's a neurodegenerative disease, so your brain cells are dying. So so MRI scans, which are sometimes if you guys see like scans of brains, a colorful ones on the internet, that's mostly done by MRIs. You'll see that the brains have shrunk massively. So that's the neurodegenerative aspect. And then we have the cognitive aspect, where the declines, the decline in personality and all memory, language skills, all these sorts of things. So dementia is an umbrella term at this moment.
No, fantastic. I'm learning a lot. So now let's learn some more. So please elaborate and tell us more about your research and how you actually got about to conducting it.
You know what? Well, I was in my master's and I went to this academic conference for a new institute at Queen Mary University, which is now called the Preventive Neurology Unit. And basically, their whole agenda is how can we prevent neurodegenerative conditions such as Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, because, there are some advancements in terms of treatments, but we're realizing that if we can prevent them, then that could help a lot with the incidence rates and some of the prevalence rates. And I just heard them talking about it. And one of the speakers, which is Dr. Charles Marshall, who's now my supervisor, spoke about the massive bridge in research, in that a lot of research done in, for example, dementia are 90% middle-class white males, and that a lot of what we actually know, we cannot translate to say that it explains. So let's say for risk factors, we can't translate to say that the risk factors are the same for, let's say, women, ethnic minorities, people from deprived areas, and that they will launching a study done in East London, where we're at, which is a very diverse area. And the whole aim was to make research looking at ethnic minorities and a deprived population, which most studies, if you actually read up, you'll notice that it's probably max 10% ethnic minorities, and the rest is predominantly white people. So what we actually know today, even in terms of genetics concerning dementia and Alzheimer's disease, which is the most prevalent form of dementia, is when looking at the white population and less deprived population. So we're realizing that it's unethical. It hides a lot, and it hides a lot of factors, and it's even more surprising because ethnic minorities are the most at risk of dementia. They have the highest prevalence of dementia. So it's like, wait, we're focusing on one ethnic group, which yes is at risk, but we're completely neglecting other demographic groups and ethnic groups who are much more likely to get a diagnosis at a younger age, much more likely to have a worse prognosis. Like, what's going on? And I think immediately after that day, I went up to one of the directors and I was just like, whatever you're doing, I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of this. And he was just like, what monsters are you in? What are you doing? And he was like, I'll get you in contact. You can do your master's research project with Charlie. And I said, great. And basically 3 months of emailing, I finally got in contact. And that's when I started my research project, which was just a glimpse of what I'm doing now for my PhD. So that was something where I just knew I had to be a part of it, definitely.
Wow. Well, big ups to you for approaching the director, number one.
I know.
It shows a lot of
wine. I'm sure it was wine.
Judge courage. It gives you that. It gives you that. But then that's very interesting that you mentioned that the Black ethnicity group is more at risk. But however, we're looking at the wrong people
in the Western world. Yeah, by nearly 50, we have an increased risk compared to white people. Let's see, looking at the USA and the UK, by about 50%, between 40 and 50% more likely.
Wow. And I don't even think that as Black people we know that, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm learning this now.
I had zero idea. I didn't even, and this is me whereby dementia was the main reason why I got into neuroscience 3 years earlier. And that was the first time I heard all of that. And I was like, wait, people don't know this. And this has to be spoken about. And we have to understand why,
Wow. No, it's very important research. And anyway, just bringing it back to, Black communities or African perspective, mental health as a whole has got so much stigma around it. In some cases, we choose to think it doesn't even exist or, that you are demonically possessed, and there is an array of mental health conditions, which, like you said, it affects the Black population more. Yeah. Why? I don't even. Well, I wanted to ask you, why did you choose to study dementia? But you already answered that. But I'm like, why do you think there's just so much stigma around us learning about dementia? And while you answer that, with the research that you're conducting, are people receptive to learn about the research, the findings? Are people like, okay, what? I'm shocked. But how are people taking it?
I think that, when it comes to, first part of your question, when it comes to the Black community, so this is Black African, Black Caribbean, African Americans, wherever you are, yes, there is a lot of stigma when it comes to, firstly, mental health. And I think that's mainly got to do with, one, a lack of proper information and education on the matters. And I think that number two, there's a lot of mistrust between our communities. And when it comes to the medical or pharmaceutical companies or communities, that side, there is, number one, you might find, especially for our elders, they might not understand, even when they go to the doctors, what the doctors are saying. There's a lack of trust. And there's conspiracy theories, a lack of understanding. There definitely needs to be a bridge brought in, removing that stigma. But I think that stigma is there for a reason. And I think that it's unfair for people to say, well, this community doesn't trust us, so they will have to figure it out. I think that it's for the pharmaceutical communities, for the medical communities, to find sustainable ways in which to reach out to people and to break down those stigmas. And I think that a lot of the time when it comes to mental health, it's because, whether we're looking at addictions or nervous breakdowns. For example, if a Black man is having a nervous breakdown, let's say that he's having an episode for schizophrenia, right? And he's on a hypermaniac episode, nobody thinks, oh, let's take him to the hospital. This man is having a breakdown. It's call the police. Police would detain her. And I've spoken with a lot of hospital staff that have spoken about this, where it's like when we show that aspect of ourselves in a vulnerable position, we aren't seen as, okay, this person needs to be taken care of. We're seen as a threat. We're seen as a danger. And oftentimes, I guess a lot of Black communities, we have, especially in deprived areas, we know the addicts. We know the people who mentally aren't fine, but what's being done? They get taken somewhere, they come back, they're still the same. They haven't gotten any better. If not, maybe they've even gotten worse. So I think that there hasn't been enough progress in terms of medical facilities and psychiatric facilities in helping people, and not just helping them in that moment, but long-term sustainability. And I think that, talking about mental health firstly is a great way to break those stigmas. But I think importantly with dementia, to see that this is something that happens to a lot of people. And I think that at the same time, how Western cultures and African or Black cultures deal with the elderly is very different. Within Black cultures, the elders are your responsibility. They live with you. You're less likely to take them to a nursing home. So I think that a lot of people see it as their responsibility to solve it. And oftentimes this tends to be female carers of the family who take on that burden, as opposed to, let me take this person to a nursing home, or somebody else can sort of fix it and sort it out. It's more like this is our responsibility and we don't want to bring shame to our family, whereas there's no need for shame, And so I think there's a lot of stigmas and just cultural differences, and even some cultures don't have the word dementia in their language. It's whatever word they use, it's quite demeaning. So I think there's just a whole bridge. But I think first thing first, any manuals about dementia, psychiatric health, they need to be translated into people's languages. Speak to them in ways when they go to the doctors or their GP for that 15 minutes, don't throw big words at them and expect them to just absorb it. Or you sit down and explain, whether it's manuals but find a way in which it's sustainably communicated and there's time, And I think that in East London, we're doing a great job with that because we have dementia-friendly communities. We have great memory service clinics that are ethically diverse, whereby now it's a requirement that whatever languages are common, from Bangladesh or whatever, there are nurses or people on board who can translate and who can help with that. So I think that within East London, there's a bit of progress there. But yeah, there's still definitely stigma. And it goes both ways. Yeah.
Definitely. So what are memory clinics? Just to clarify that.
Yeah. So usually when you go to like your family GP, like it's like 15 minutes where like they assess you, they record things, and then they'll usually refer you to a memory clinic. A memory clinic is where you'll get your actual diagnosis of dementia. So there they'll perform neuropsychiatric tests that test like different like cognitive domains and see. So for example, like your speed of thinking, processing speed, orientation, all these sorts of things. They do psychiatric tests for you. And if they have enough funding, they could even perform an MRI, or they can, like other things that they can do to just detect whether it's amyloids in your blood. So amyloids are like the proteins which are present for people who are experiencing cognitive decline. But it's not just isolated to dementia. So they perform all these sort of tests, and that's basically where you get your full-on diagnosis of dementia.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. Phazha, you speak passionately about your research and you're very well informed. But just to remind everybody, you are 23 years old, right?
Yeah,
yeah, you're 23 years old and you're doing your PhD. And, you know, when you do your PhD, you meet a lot of important, inverted commas, people, very high-ranking people. You know, and some of them might be like you said, oh, you're a baby. Why should we listen to you? You know, and do you have those cases that people sometimes don't take you seriously? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I'd like to firstly say that I have an amazing supervisor, and I know that's not everyone's story, but mine is pretty awesome. And he's someone whereby he constantly reminds me I can talk to him about things. But yeah, no, there's been instances like whereby I could have been attending like a friendly chat just about education, and the moment I start explaining what I'm doing, how much data, because the data that my research team we're dealing with over 1 million people that were and their GP records. So we've got their demographics, their age, whether they've ever had childhood brain tumors. We've got about over 200 covariates. So there's a lot of coding GP work, and I get a lot of help. So, but I noticed that whenever I mention it, I've had people who just try to pick on the most randomest things. They'll ask me on the spot to randomly describe what logistic regression is. If I say, oh no, it's a statistical method I'm using to calculate the risks and stuff, they'll ask me, what is it? Where does it come from? Just to try and find like loopholes in my understanding. Oh. And I've had a man tell me that I have no idea what I'm doing, and next time I should actually research what I'm actually doing for my PhD. I've had people say that they don't believe my thesis for my master's was my own work, or that what I stipulated is what I did. Yeah, no, I've had that. I've had just people smirk or whatsoever, and it tends to be more so outside my institute, because I feel like our team is pretty small and they're very protective. But whenever I go out to other areas, yeah, no, it's happened. And I would say that I think it was only maybe in February after my birthday when I realized that by default I started talking less. I didn't feel comfortable talking about my research. I felt like, who am I? And all these sort of self-doubt things came in, and it did affect my self-esteem. And I developed a bit of a stutter, especially when I was talking about my research. And what happened? I'm trying to think what made me change. You know what? Sometimes I go through things in life where it's like there's something that sort of zaps me where I'm just like, nah, bro. Where I'm like, what? I'm like, wait, when I calculate, I'm going to be in this program for how many more years? I must be sad for how long? Nah. to use my age against me, let me double and triple prepare before any time I know I'm going to speak about anything. Because I realize you don't ask me questions about my research. You ask me questions on the brim, like other factors that, you want to see how well read I am. So I'm like, you know what, let's do it. And let's speak. And because here's my thing, I don't mind not knowing things. That's the whole point of doing this PhD, is because I don't know the answer. And on top of that, nobody else knows the answer. Let's start there. That's why we're all trying to research it. So for me, I realized that, you know what, I'm going to take in constructive criticism. In order to get that, I need to open my mouth. I need to make a fool out of myself sometimes. Have people correct me, but so long as I have the passion and the eagerness to not take it personally, what can happen? And that's why I just said, no, I'm not going to be sad. I'm not going to let them come over me. I'm not saying that I'm the smartest genius in the whole world, but this is something that I care about. And how am I going to learn if I don't speak? How am I going to be corrected? And it's almost like, during my PhD, I've also realized that, like, whenever I have to write up reports or for papers we want to get published, like, there's going to be 7 other people that are going to edit it. Just this whole notion of perfection is a delusion. It's a major delusion. And I think that when it comes to research, people need to understand that if you're trying to maintain perfection just so that you can save face, okay, great. But the main thing is make errors so that you can learn. And you can only have it, you open yourself up to that criticism. I'm not saying allow yourself to be bullied. No, you must tell people as well, like, hey, if people like what you're doing is unnecessary, or report it or keep track. But I just sort of realized that, you know what, now is not the time to have doubt in myself when I'm finally at the researching point. All I ever wanted to do was research. I'm finally at it. I don't mind being made a fool. If you think I'm not smart enough, great for you. I'm still gonna send you work and ask you what you think, since you think you're so smart. So let me even put that burden on you, where I will send you more work that you can also review and correct. And I realized that there's no need for ego. Like, I don't care. All I care about is that these people who are affected, answers come through. They understand. But one thing I will not tolerate is any type of, emotional and mental abuse. There, I will report you. And I'm not afraid to report you or to, put you in your place. Sometimes you have to be like, no, there's no need to speak to me like that. Let's speak, cordially. So that was something I had to something just zapped in me when I was like, nope, I must be set for 3 years. Never. I'm like, nah. Because other people want to use my age, something I can't even change. My age. This is not my fault. So no, now I'm more open about it. I don't try hard about it, and I'm good. I'm still my personality. I don't try to, I don't try to use a different voice. All these, because there's a lot of older people in the academic community. I don't try to be like, okay, let me speak like them and poise my voice, because then they'll take me seriously. It's like, nope, I'm gonna be myself. And at the end of the day, I have faith that my work is good, if not borderline great. And it makes it that much more fun to work with me, because I'm always cracking jokes. And it's just like, hey, let's, like I'm going to be me. And that's enough. That's enough for me. And because it's enough for me, you have to deal with that. So yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. And I love your attitude. And, like you said, it took you a while. And I think there might be some people listening who are like, oh my word, I wish I could be that person. Because, it's easier said than done. There's sometimes where, especially in this field, you can't be, a lot of stuff can happen to you over and over again. And then your voice slowly starts to get diminished, But since you have overcome this brings me to my final question then. What advice would you give to somebody, I know you've already mentioned it, but now who might be in the postgraduate studies, who's going through this, or just to somebody, a young person, a young researcher who is interested in your research, particularly your research around dementia, what advice, what golden nugget would you give them to be like, if I wish I had known this before I started?
You don't have to be a straight A star student at all. Get that notion out your head that no, honestly, you don't have to be a genius who does how many extra school curriculum activities, who's read this many books, and no. Do you have the passion and do you work hard? Passion and ability to work hard. I would say, yeah, like I did well academically in school, A/B student, but it wasn't because it came easy to me. Like the amount of things I have to read over and over again to just understand, because I'm like, huh? But my passion and my ability to work hard, which, by the way, my sister says is my passion, is to work hard. It pulls you through. So I think that if you fail a class, if you fail a module, especially those people who are in, like, I know in South Africa, it's like matric or like your A levels or your IB, you're constantly told that if you are not this super brain child, there's no way in which you would get that far. It's a lie. It's okay if you fail some subject that you tried your best. It's okay if you have to take a year out to figure out what you want. But I would say that if you have passion and you're willing to put in the work in, which is easy if you have that passion, you can do it. You don't have to be the stereotypical genius. I would not say that I'm a genius. I would say that I work very hard to just understand all these long words and things that I'm reading sometimes, but I get through it. So I would say that don't buy into that. Don't reduce your value and based on your grades. Do not attach your self-esteem to your academic achievements. If the earlier you learn that, the better. And I had to learn that the hard way. It took me 2 years, I think, when I got after I finished my A levels, because I didn't get the grades I wanted, but it took me 2 years to realize that, I'm attaching my self-worth to my academic achievements. And there's so much more than that. There's so much. So I would say best advice, do not attach your academic achievements to your self-worth. You are enough. And if you have that passion on the hard work, you will figure it through. You'll figure it out and you can do it. STEM, anyone can do it. And it's a lot funner than you expect. A lot funner.
Definitely. Phazha, that's some very solid and good advice. And like you said, if you shouldn't attach your self-worth to your grades. And this, I think, can transcend to even postgraduates. Like it's a thing that will constantly keep on coming. But I think if you always remember that line, that you are not your publication numbers, you are not your grades, you are not, all these things that come to you. It's hard sometimes, but I think it's really good. And thank you so much. I have learned a lot.
Thank you. I love this. This is so much fun.
Yeah, you've been an awesome guest. I love your passion. And we've learned a lot. And I wish you all the best for your research. And I hope maybe you don't solve all of the world's problems yet, but you find a solution. And I hope more people, especially, in the Black communities, have now realized the importance that, this is actually something that happens, and we are more aware of it now. So that wouldn't have been possible without you and telling us about it. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure rambling.
No, thank you so much. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Root of the Science podcast with your girl and with an E. Until next time, goodbye.